Nurse Betty. I was working in the NICU when we had a threat of a tornado. Some nurses got pulled to go to a sister hospital in town to assist in the disaster plan. When all was over, one of the nurses returned with this story. She was assisting the nurses in giving some meds before pulling all into the hallways. Every PT she went to said they already had their meds from the nice nurse in the white uniform and hat. She realized after she left that it had been a while since a nurse had worn a hat. That story revealed the urban legend of Nurse Betty. The story goes, she had an affair with a married MD, became pregnant, then agreed to allow him to perform an abortion on her on the second floor OR room. She died and he went to jail. She never left the hospital and was seen frequently. The local newspaper would do an article on her every year around Halloween on her sightings. The hospital has since been replaced with college dorms. I wonder if any students have seen her. The room in the bell tower. Had always heard ghost stories, but never had my own until I had been nursing about 6 years. We had a bed tower in the hospital where I worked the night shift as a float nurse. It was a pretty quiet night at about 3 a.m., and the nurses were sitting at the desk charting when my patient's light went off. His room was right in front of the station, so I went in to check, and he wanted to know if everything was okay. And I said, "What do you mean?" And said, "Someone just came in here. I woke up and someone was standing by the bed, and then they went out but didn't say anything." I didn't want to upset him, but I knew no one had been in there, so I just said, "Maybe it was the CNA, or maybe you dreamed it." But I was secretly a little freaked out. Then I was really freaked out when I went out and told the others. They weren't surprised, said it happened all the time in that room, and the call light frequently went off when the room was unused. No one was sure who the ghost was, but had been seen many times. Sure enough, not a while later, I was working that floor, and in the early morning hours, the light went off. Same story, different patient. The Old Nun. Like most very old hospitals, at one time our hospital was run by nuns. One particular unit had been converted into a sleep study lab area for outpatients tests. One shift in the middle of the night, I was watching the video monitor, and 5 patients simultaneously began removing their monitoring equipment. I went into the first room to ask what was going on, and the patient said that old nurse with the cap told her the story was over and that she could leave. All the patients reported the same story. Never opened the door. In the morgue at my hospital, I would always hear knocking coming from inside the freezer. It really creeped me out, especially when the pathologist looked up, grabbed me by the shoulders, stared me straight in the eye and said, "You hear that? You never open that door when they're knocking. Never." It turned out to be some loose pipes. He thought it was hilarious. I didn't sleep that night. A call for help. Psychiatric RN here. Absolutely. My first job was in a small 35-bed psych hospital in California. It used to be a medical facility where surgeries were performed and, of course, people died. When I'd worked the night shift, I'd sometimes get a phone call from the local police station asking if everything was okay. Sure, everything was fine. All the patients were asleep and it was just a normal night. The police then said that they received a 911 call from our hospital, and the extension from where the call was being made was the arts and crafts room. Nobody goes in there at night, not even staff. It's always had a creepy vibe and used to be where surgeries were performed. The caller, identifying herself as Satana, was asking for help. This would happen about once a month or so. Night shift didn't have much staff, so as supervisor, I knew where all my staff was because I would be the one to help relieve them during breaks. I know with 100% certainty that no staff or patients were the ones calling 911. I know it wasn't a patient because psych hospital doors are locked, and to get to that room, a patient would have to cross 3 barriers of passcode protected doors. Getting ready. Over the course of my nursing career, I have experienced numerous patient deaths. It always seems there is some circumstance revolving around one that you always remember. Several months back, A terminally ill patient who had been suffering from leukemia for a number of years began declining in health rapidly. One night around supper time, he became very anxious and indicated that he had to get ready because they were coming to get him at 6 p.m. Several minutes later, when checking on his status again, he had passed away at nearly 6 p.m. on the dot. The elevator. I was at the nurse's station, and we heard the bell in the elevator ringing. Someone was yelling, "Help!" and we heard pounding. We called security to tell them someone was stuck in the elevator. I then walked over to the elevator doors and was shouting to the person to try to stay calm and help was on the way. She just kept yelling for help, banging and ringing the bell. Security called the nurse's station to say all of the elevators were working and they didn't find anyone stuck. At this moment, whoever was in the elevator was suddenly quiet. A few times I had been in the elevator, and for no reason, it went to the 5th floor. The 5th floor is totally unoccupied, but used to be a hospice unit. I would be going up from the ground floor, and the only button lit up would be 3. But the elevator would pass my floor, go to 5th, open the door. No one there. I never was brave enough to step foot onto the 5th floor. The coincidence. I had a patient one night who was mentally disabled. She was a young black woman with these huge eyes. I don't know if she always looked like that or if she was just genuinely spooked, but they were open wide. The first thing she said to me when I walked in the room was, "She dead. That lady dead," nodding her head at the woman in the next bed. The woman in the next bed had apparently been dealing with this all day and was fed up. "I'm not dead," she yelled. I tried to calm her down to no avail. The day shift nurse told me she'd been doing that all day. I felt so bad for her roommate. I considered trying to transfer her, but that would just put someone else in the room to put up with it. She did this all night. She would even put her call light on to tell her roommate was dead. To tell me her roommate was dead. So this was creepy on its own, but guess who died the next day? It wasn't an expected death either. I don't believe in the supernatural, but damn, that was quite a coincidence. Death would always follow. I worked for a while in a residential hospice facility. Often before one of our residents would die, many of the staff nurses would see a little child, sometimes a boy, sometimes a girl, playing in the hallway. The timing was never consistent. Sometimes it would be minutes before death, sometimes it would be hours or days, but always a death would follow. Seeing the child never was really scary, except that you knew it was something freaky. The whole place has a peaceful feel, not scary usually. Often the patients would speak about angels at their side. Once we had a nurse as a patient, and when she died, we heard singing. We checked all the rooms for a choir on TV and found nothing to explain the sound. The inspector. We had a gentleman that we called the inspector. He appears at the end of the long hall. Our wings are L-shaped. He carries a clipboard in his hand. When he shows up, a resident usually dies within the next couple days. We've also had residents ring and tell us that there was a man standing next to their roommate's bed, that we should tell him to leave, no men on nights. The roommate usually dies soon after, and then there's the children. Several lucid residents have reported children in the halls at night. There's a children's home behind us where children have been abused in the past.